Hey everybody, welcome to the MAHA Media Hub. I'm Tony Lyons, president of MAHA Action. And look, I don't say this every week, but today is a big deal. What we're about to talk about is something scientists have been trying to get anyone in government to take seriously for decades. And it's finally happened. When Secretary Kennedy started talking about MAHA, lots of people heard about it and they thought, yeah, that sounds nice, but good luck, right? Because the problems are so big. Chronic disease, toxic food, contaminated water, the whole system is broken. But here's what people missed. Secretary Kennedy wasn't just naming problems. He was building an army, a MAHA army of moms, dads, doctors, scientists, advocates, people who were done waiting for permission to fix things. And last week, that army delivered. At HHS, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H, dropped a bombshell. They announced a first-of-its-kind program to finally get to the bottom of what microplastics are doing inside our bodies, in our brains, in our lungs, in the plaque building up in our arteries. This stuff is literally inside us. And until now, nobody in a position of power wanted to fund a real, comprehensive study on it. Nobody wanted to touch it. But that just changed. ARPA-H committed $144 million. That's not a typo, $144 million to launch what they're calling the systematic targeting of microplastics, and that is called STOMP. And I love that name because that's exactly what needs to happen to get rid of this problem. And it doesn't stop there. The EPA then announced that they're joining in with what they called landmark coordinated actions to address microplastic contamination. So now you've got HHS and the EPA moving together on this. When's the last time that you saw that kind of coordination on something that actually matters to regular people? So Secretary Kennedy and EPA Administrator Zeldin laid out three clear goals. Number one, measure it. We need to know exactly how much of this stuff is in our water and in our tissue. And then, real numbers, not guesses. Number two, figure out which plastics are the most dangerous and how they're getting into us and moving through our bodies. And number three, and this is the one that really gets me, develop ways to actually remove microplastics from the human body. Think about that for a second. We're not just talking about studying a problem, we're talking about fixing it. And let me be real with you. This is not some abstract theoretical issue for policy wonks at some debate or conference. This is in you right now. Microplastics have been found in human plaques, in brain tissue, even in newborn babies. So this is as personal as it gets. And we're going to dig into the science of it on today's show. But here's what I really want you to take away from this. For decades, let that sink in. Independent scientists, researchers, people dedicating their careers to this, they were raising the alarm. And what happened? Absolutely nothing. They were ignored, dismissed, told it wasn't a priority. The system just didn't want to hear it. And now because of MAHA, because of Secretary Kennedy, because of all of you who refuse to shut up, this issue is front and center on a nationwide scientific, administrative, and political agenda. This joint effort between HHS and EPA is an historic milestone. There's no precedent for it in public health science, none. This is a first. So today we have an incredible lineup. We've got Stefanie Spear and Jess Kramer. These are the government officials who are actually building this thing. We've got scientists and researchers who've been in the trenches on microplastics. Matthew Campen, Dr. Marcus Eriksen, Dr. Leonardo Trasande, and Josephine Musco. And then Kyle Diamantis is going to give us an exciting update of what's happening at FDA. Congresswoman Julia Letlow is here to tell us about the importance of MAHA in Louisiana. And of course, we've got our regulars, Russell Brand and Dr. Eric Berg. So it's going to be a packed show. But first, let me bring on Stefanie Spear. She's Secretary Kennedy's Deputy Chief of Staff. She's the Secretary's closest and most trusted advisor, operating at the top of federal health policy. And she's an incredible human being and a close friend. And she is probably the hardest working person in government that I've ever met. And she's more loyal to both the secretary and to President Trump than anyone I can think of. So she's here today to break down this historic microplastics moment. Stefanie, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tony. You always make me feel so good. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And the only reason I'm sitting here on a plane and joining you today is how excited I am about the announcement we made last week, and also the speakers that we have on the show today. So, thank you so much, Tony, and everyone at MAHA. As Tony said last week, HHS and EPA announced a historic set of actions during a roundtable hosted by EPA to confront one of the most pervasive and least understood environmental health challenges, microplastics, an issue that I've spent decades focused on, and was so grateful to both the EPA Administrator and Secretary Kennedy for their leadership on this issue. So thanks to the foresight of EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, EPA for the first time is elevating microplastics and pharmaceuticals as a priority contaminant in our nation's drinking water framework. That is step one to really getting regulation done, and a huge step forward for EPA. And also thanks to the unyielding resolve of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ARPA-H launched STOMP, a first of its kind national effort to measure, understand, and ultimately remove microplastics from the human body. And thanks, of course, to President Trump's his courage and his leadership. Last week's announcement marked a major step forward in this administration's commitment to make America healthy again. Last September's MAHA strategy report set a clear directive.
Good day to you.
Sorry, hang on. I'll mute. Hold on.
Yeah, so Stefanie, I guess you're probably going to have to end there. But so let me just say, Stefanie, that, thanks so much for the incredible work you're doing. We're so grateful for the fact that you work day and night to make this country, to make all of us and our children healthier. And we are incredibly, incredibly grateful. Hope you have a beautiful flight.
Hang on, because I'm missing my most ultimate favorite spot. Can I get 10 more seconds?
Go for it. We'll wait patiently. Okay, let's give Stefanie just another minute. And Stefanie, as soon as you're ready, but
there we go. Okay.
There you go.
So again, last September, this was in the MAHA strategy report to evaluate the risks and exposures of microplastics and synthetics in common products. So the Trump administration committed to this work, and HHS and EPA are delivering on it. During the roundtable we had last week, we were joined by 3 renowned microplastic experts, and I'm thrilled to share that they're here with us today. They are Dr. Marcus Eriksen, who's been a longtime friend of mine. Thrilled that he's involved. He's an environmental scientist and co-founder of Gyres Institute, known for pioneering research in microplastics and ocean pollution. Also, we have Dr. Matthew Campen, a biomedical scientist and professor at the University of New Mexico, who studies how pollutants, including microplastic, affects the brain and the cardiovascular system. We also have Dr. Leonardo Trasande, a physician scientist and professor of NYU Lagoon Health, whose work focuses on environmental exposures and their impact on child health and long-term outcomes. But first, I'd like to introduce a new friend and colleague of mine, EPA Assistant Administrator of the Office of Water, Jess Kramer. It's an honor to work alongside Jess and the entire EPA team as we advance President Trump's agenda to make America healthy again. Thanks to everyone for being patient while I'm on the flight, and I'm just really excited about the call today. So thanks to MAHA Action for all you guys do to make these conversations happen.
So yeah, thanks so much, Stefanie. I'm going to say again for the incredible work you do, and we're so grateful, and we hope you have a beautiful flight.
Thank you, Tony.
So yeah, next we have Jess Kramer, and Stefanie has already given you a little bit of background. So welcome to the show. We're great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Tony. And I have to just take a second to say that every once in a while in your career, you come across someone who you're going to be friends with for a long time. Your interests align. You're passionate about the policies that you're pursuing. You nerd out on the weekend on calls together, talking about the good work that you can do, especially with respect to making America healthy again. And Stefanie is one of those people. And so I'm very grateful that this job has brought me across her path. But Stefanie teed up a little bit. The announcement that EPA made last week was with respect to what's called our contaminant candidate list. For folks who have heard me speak on this before, you've heard me drone on about the Safe Drinking Water Act and the process that we have to follow, and the prescriptive nature of the law, such that we get regulations that are legally defensible and are based on radical transparency and gold standard science. The contaminant candidate list is the first step in that process. And so for as much as we talked last week in the roundtable, or we heard Stefanie and her and the great experts she just mentioned talk about the fact that there's additional research needed, and the funding, the great funding that's being provided. The CCL is kind of the Safe Drinking Water Act version of that, and so it gets listed as a priority contaminant. It's on CCL version 6. Every 5 years, EPA puts out one of these lists and identifies its priority contaminants. We've listed it as a group. So because of the questions with respect to how do we sample for microplastics, how do we determine which types of microplastics, which sizes of microplastics are most impactful in terms of potential risk to human health, we decided to just list it as a group so that we didn't lose anything through the cracks. This list really is what drives funding and research in the drinking water space. It will be used as the basis to make regulatory determinations moving forward on microplastics. The thing that I can point to to think about, kind of to conceptualize how this works, is, for example, PFAS is listed as a group already on the candidate contaminant list, and so then we can pull pieces out. We can regulate more rapidly potentially than regulating a whole group. And so a lot of doors open once we put something on the contaminant candidate list. I also want to just mention briefly, even though I'm so excited to be talking about microplastics, and I think you all know how passionate I am, especially as a mother, thinking about the fact that when I turn the tap on, and when every American turns the tap on, there should be confidence of what's in your drinking water. The other thing that I'm really excited to mention that we listed as a group is pharmaceuticals for the first time. And so we listed that as a group the same way was just speaking about how we listed microplastics as a group. There's a lot of question about what pharmaceuticals could be in drinking water. And so EPA is front and center, ready to dive into determining what is in folks' drinking water, whether it's microplastics, whether it's pharmaceuticals, PFAS. We are at the forefront of it, working hand in hand with our partners at HHS, and Secretary Kennedy and Administrator Zeldin are extremely passionate about these things. And that passion trickles down to us at the staff level. And so I couldn't be more excited that we're taking on these challenges. I couldn't be more excited about the radical transparency that's going to continue to come through our processes of research, and working with all of you. The last pitch I will make in the last 16 seconds here is that the candidate contaminant list is out for public comment right now. We also released human health benchmarks for pharmaceuticals. Please take a look at it. Please read it. Please let us know if you think we missed the mark on something, if there's something we should tweak a little bit, we should look at differently. We want to hear from you, and now is the time to do that. So thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be on, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jess. And, thanks for all the work that you've been doing at the EPA's Office of Water. We're so excited to see the great things that you and Stefanie can do together to, lessen the impact of microplastics exposures and, pharmaceuticals and PFAS in water. So great to have you on, and hope that you'll keep coming on.
Thanks so much, Tony. Anytime.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matthew Campen, and he's a toxicologist trained at the University of North Carolina and Johns Hopkins. And he's led several recent investigations of the exposure of humans to microplastics, highlighting the accumulation in the brain and then throughout the body. So very important work, and we're grateful to have you doing that work and to have you come on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Tony. It's great to be involved with this launch of this new initiative, both for the Environmental Protection Agency and Department of Health and Human Services. Let me first shine a light on what this problem is that we're talking about. We're talking about the degradation product of all the plastics that we have on Earth. They will eventually break down into smaller and smaller bits of plastic until they're what we call microplastics. And you think about it, this is something that's been growing exponentially in our lives. We make more and more of this plastic and we throw it away, and there's just more of it breaking down. Right now, there's over a ton of plastic per person for every person on Earth. That's just an enormous amount that's there, and we don't know a lot about these microplastics. Even more so, we often talk about nanoplastics, and what that means is plastics that are so small they're less than what we call a micrometer in size. They're the size of viruses. They can be inside your cells. They can get inside your body. They're kind of what we call a dark matter in this science, because we've done so little right now because of lack of technology, lack of insight into where they come from, where they are. They're just an unknown scientifically, and that's part and parcel to the need for this ARPA-H program. So the challenges we face in terms of assessing health risks from these particles is just really daunting. The new initiative is strategically targeted at solving some of these issues to rapidly advance our understanding of the influence that these micro and nanoplastics have on human health. And importantly, this new announcement is really consistent with the initiatives from the Make America Healthy, Commission strategy report that really focuses on targeted on chronic diseases. There's a number of diseases that we worry about for a couple of reasons. The science is not strong yet, and that's why we need this initiative. But we worry about cardiovascular disease, long-term coronary artery health. There's evidence that there might be an increased risk because of plastics exposure. We don't know how strong that is or if it's a causal relationship. Same with diseases of the brain. Alzheimer's disease and dementia have been associated with plastics exposure, but we need more data to really assess how is that happening, why, and in who. Impairment of fertility for both men and women, risks for cancer, things like that. There's not a lot of data right now, and we really need it. So, I think I'm speaking for a lot in the community. I've talked to dozens of people over the last week on this new initiative. People are excited for it. It's going to put a lot of money into the research world, and collectively, we really appreciate the decisive leadership that's coming from the Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin, as well as from HHS Secretary Kennedy. This new initiative, it's just a fantastic example of the United States government coming together, the EPA and Health and Human Services working together on this that's, it's not an us versus them problem. It's just an us problem. So I really look forward to, solving the problem together. And that's the exciting part of this.
Thanks so much. And, it's so clear that, we have skyrocketing rates of chronic disease that, comes from cardiovascular problems, from artery problems, from brain problems like, Alzheimer's and dementia, and then, plummeting fertility rates, skyrocketing cancer rates. So we need to find out, what role microplastics and nanoplastics play in that. So it's a great moment to see that you and your team and this partnership is going forward to try to get closer to the truth of what's going on. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Next up, we have Dr. Marcus Eriksen, and he's an environmental scientist and co-founder of the Gyres Institute. He led expeditions to research the global distribution and fate of plastics in the world's seas. He's also, his research has focused on helping municipalities and the private sector to comprehend the systems and the sources of microplastics, including biomaterials, and with a view towards stopping the harm from plastics in the environment and on all of our health. So this is just an incredible global problem. And Dr. Marcus, thanks for coming on to discuss it with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I'd like to first, acknowledge that this initiative is really putting a lot of, teeth behind the research. It's providing a lot of funding and attention that's long overdue. But I want to take a scale back a little bit, look at the global perspective, because I've spent the last 20 years, surveying the world's oceans, a couple dozen expeditions. As you can see, the slide right here. Every one of those little pictures you see on the map that shows microplastics is where we have been on the planet, surveying the ocean surface and really documenting the abundance and distribution of microplastics. I mean, how much is out there and where it is, and also impacts. But you may want to ask, what does it have to do with human health? So I want to point to that graph looking at right there, and that shows this exponential rise in the last 15, 20 years. So that's a 40-year trend that we published this a couple of years ago. From 1979 to 2019, what we saw was a steady state until around 2005, this rapid increase in microplastics worldwide. And a lot of that is the fragmentation of these materials going from macro down to the micro scale, but as big as a grain of rice. But what we're seeing now is a continued degradation down to the nanoplastic range. I just saw a paper came out last few weeks estimating over 40 quadrillion nanoplastic particles in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's, again, a global scale. So my global scale of ocean plastics estimates 170 trillion. So combine that with atmospheric exposures, we're looking at a lot of plastic out there. Now, this image you see right here, now on the far left, that's the point of a pencil lead, give you an idea of scale, and a human hair in the middle. So what we're finding, what Dr. Campen just talked about, and Leo Trasande, his research, looking at the impacts of these really small particles. And the ubiquity of our exposure makes this very concerning to me, because some initial work by Dr. Campen and Dr. Trasande is pointing out the seriousness of these impacts. So if you think of like what's in the heart, what's in that cardiovascular plaque or in brain tissues, it's down to like 1/100th of the diameter of a human hair. It's really small stuff. And there's a lot of it out there. And it's so small, you can inhale it, you can ingest it, it's in drinking water, it's in bottled water for sure. You can even get through your skin, translocation of these nanoscale particles through our skin. Once it's through your skin, through your gut barrier, into your bloodstream, it goes everywhere. And what concerns me is not as much these days the ocean of plastics, it's the abundance of plastics inside the ocean within our bodies. And this image here, you're seeing some of the images of these tiny particles from human tissues. In fact, I believe that top picture is one that Dr. Campen was in his paper showing those particles look like inside the human brain. I mean, they're small. You're looking at 200 nanometers or smaller, and they're these jagged little polyethylene particles. So this initiative, what Kennedy and Zeldin are putting forward here is $144 million to really address, to fund the research, to understand how can we measure these things that small. We need the technology. And then what is the impact? What is the harm? Then how do we get it out of our bodies? So those three things alone, that amount of money going into research, it's really about time. And I'm so glad to see that this initiative take off, and this influx of research is really going to help.
Thanks so much. It really is crazy when you think about, how much plastic is out there. I mean, it was 1 ton per person. And like you said, it's in everything. It's on everything. It's in the air. It's in all of us. So it's great to see that there's actual work being done to reverse it, lessen the impact of it, to find out what that impact is, and to start to really begin to protect people. So thanks so much for the work you're doing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Leonardo Trasande. He is a world famous leader in environmental health, and his research focuses on identifying the role of environmental exposures and how that leads to chronic disease. And he's been documenting the economic costs for policymakers of failing to prevent the diseases that come from microplastics. Most recently, his team has documented $249 billion per year in disease costs in the US due to chemicals used in plastics. So Dr. Trasande leads a cohort center at the National Institute of Health of environmental influences on child health outcomes. So thanks so much for coming on, and great to have you with us.
Delighted to be here with you. Make no mistake about it, plastic is a complex and multidimensional threat to human health. You've heard a lot today about the effects of micro and nanoplastics, but there's a broader impact that that tells us to act right now. There's 16,000 chemicals used in plastic materials. We know nothing, mind you, about 10,000 of them, but we already know so much about bisphenols used in aluminum can linings and thermal paper receipts, phthalates used in food packaging, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances in nonstick cooking and oil and water resistant clothing, and flame retardant chemicals used in plastic materials that tells us we need to act urgently. And that's because these chemicals hack our hormones, our natural signaling molecules that underlie so many basic biological functions to humankind, from temperature, metabolism, salt, sugar, and even sex. We're talking about impacts on all of us, from cradle to grave and womb to tomb. We're talking about babies born too soon, intrauterine growth restriction contributing to childhood obesity, as well as cardiovascular risks. We're talking about 50,000 Americans dying between the ages of 55 and 64 during peak earning years of early cardiovascular mortality due to phthalate exposures alone, $24 billion in lost economic productivity. We're talking about infertility, couples not being able to conceive. We're talking also about certain hormone-sensitive cancers, breast, prostate, testicular cancer, just to name a few. And as already has been described, the economic consequences of these exposures are real. We're talking about $249 billion in disease-related costs. That's literally 1.2% of our gross domestic product going right out the window. And so this threat cannot be more urgent. This has been codified by independent entities like the Endocrine Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, the World Health Organization, the United Nations Environment Program, just to name a few. So we're really at a moment like we were with lead 50 years ago. We have so much information that tells us to act. Some will dismiss it saying that we don't have what you might call perfect causal information, but we didn't have that when we acted to get lead out of gasoline or lead out of paint. The science is telling us that we need to act right now urgently, and they're safe and simple steps we can all take. They don't require a PhD in chemistry or have to break the bank. We can use more glass and stainless steel. We can avoid microwaving or machine dishwashing plastic. We can filter our water to get PFAS out. And what I'm especially excited about with this initiative is that we're taking further steps to identify what is going on when micro and nanoplastics get in the mix. They're probably the toxic drug delivery systems that deliver endocrine disrupting chemicals to tissues, wreaking havoc from there. They may also be causing inflammation and direct physical effects. And what's really exciting about this scientific initiative is we're going to be able to bring to patient care the steps that are needed for change. Already, the National Academy of Sciences suggests that PFAS should be clinically tested in 150 million Americans. So we need to take the data and bring it to patient care and guide patients on how they can prevent their exposures. And we need to drive sustainable chemistry in a direction where we're bringing safer products to people's lives. So I'm really really excited about the Make America Healthy Again initiative here. It's really showing its leadership in action through funding research and putting on the contaminant list micro nanoplastics, which are really a huge step forward. And I'm delighted to be part of this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks for coming on. And I mean, it is really crazy when you think about the fact that there's 16,000 chemicals. And then you said there are 10,000 chemicals that we just don't know a thing about. I mean, everybody in this country ought to want their government to look into what those 10,000 chemicals are, what they do, whether we can find, other things that can take their place that are less dangerous. So, all of that work, it just has to be done. And it's clear that we've had a whole generation where that hasn't been done. So it's just great news that your team is doing it now. And then to also have sort of radical transparency on what the problems are, and then practical common sense steps that people can take to protect themselves. So that's something that's really been lacking, and it's right on our mission to inform the public and to make it easier and more affordable to be healthy. So thanks so much.
Delighted to be here. Thank you again.
Next up, we have Russell Brand. And
you're all right, just fine. I've got to jump off. Tony.
Hey.
Tony, you know that I love you.
I love you too. Russell Brand, you are the ultimate MAHA warrior.
I'm thinking about you all the time. I'm advocating for your cause, much more generally than your brilliant and bespoke guests today. The way that what I mean by that is whilst my advocacy may be general and lack the specificity and expertise of some of today's great contributors, what I unflinchingly and passionately proclaim is that control over our food and nutrition, it oughtn't be political, but the fact that it's as politicized as it is an indication of how far we have come from the ideals that we all espouse. Now, microplastics, I remember when I sort of heard that, well, if you drink tap water, what I've come to call government water, if you drink government water straight from the tap, and then there's the ossifying fluoride going straight into your brain. If you drink carbonated bottled water, you're getting the microplastics straight up the nut bag, as we call it in the UK, the testes, more generally and scientifically, this being MAHA, let's use scientific terminology. There's no way to avoid the permeating, immersive and ubiquitous horrors of the modern world. A kind of an ambience of total toxicity appears almost to be part of their policy. When I say they, I mean the empire. I mean those that control us bureaucratically, commercially, corporately. In every aspect of our lives, we find, as with microplastics, that we're in a kind of ambient fugue of toxicity. Just try and eat healthy. I love it when someone like Gary Brecker comes on here and explains these are the things, these are the supplements, these are the things that are reliable, legit and realistic. I mean, I say that while I've got methylene blue in arm's reach. I still do all this stuff, creatine, methylene blue, colostrum. I do my best to sort of supplement myself into a kind of wellness. But surely what we all ought to be doing, whether we're a man of my age or just a human being more broadly, is eating, as you advocate for in your excellent Super Bowl commercial. And well done for doing that, Tony. So, eating real food, eating whole food that you can sort of identify that doesn't have innumerable ingredients in it. And I've known that for a long time. And I know it because of people on this call and because of their advocacy. But it's actually the fact that it's so difficult to achieve shows us what an extraordinary world we're living in. We're just eating food that's healthy and good for you has become sort of some kind of political act. We're being able to rely on big pharma it would be extraordinary and excruciating naivety. And look, I know it's not the subject of our conversation today, particularly, Tony, but while things appear to be becoming more apocalyptic, and I'm aware that one aspect of the apocalypse is the beneficial revelation that all of us require, it seems just to me so important to remember that there are different ways of doing government, that there are different ways of doing politics, that direct participatory democracy is a possibility, that the very technology that's being used to propose digital ID and centralized currency and total control of every aspect of your life through biometrics and terrifying programs for incessant forever vaccines, that could be used to create democracies where our communities are run, where you have advocacy groups and expertise incorporated into the running of communities, where you could use technology to enhance permacultures. Why is it that the United Kingdom provide New Zealand with the majority of their lamb, and New Zealand provide the UK with the majority of their lamb? Surely the UK should provide the UK with their own lamb, and New Zealand should rear their own meat products. Who is benefiting from this transportation? That is so extraordinarily, that while there are these ecological movements that talk continually about preservation of the planet and love for this planet that we've been granted and that we're here to steward, that there's so few ways to actually escape the clutches of various systems that continue to impose through bureaucracy, through obscure, opaque and difficult to understand legislation, continually corrupt systems. I'm just going to show you what I'm wearing so you know how serious I am about your country and how much I love you. Please step back from the very precipice of unwinnable wars. Please support leaders that are people of authenticity and authority. And please support me in my Apollo Creed and Rocky IV undergarments. God bless you, Tony. You're a fine man and I support and adore you. Thanks for having me on your call.
Thanks, Russell. And Russell, once again, you're just a great backer of MAHA, fighting against the empire, the toxic empire poisoning all of us. You've been fighting for justice, for clarity, for transparency, and also more recently for Jesus Christ. And that brings me to your book, How to Become a Christian in 7 Days, which I think, can be used as a buffer against corruption and greed and lies and all of the things that MAHA is trying to fight. So thanks so much for everything you're doing and for writing the book.
Thanks for publishing that book. If you become who you are in Christ, that is who you are meant to be. He has an identity for you. He's waiting for you to come. It's impossible for us to overcome evil without him. That's what I believe, by his grace. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell.
Cheers, man.
Next up, we have Josephine Musco, and she's the founder of Elixir. She's a patent holder and a researcher focused on environmental health with an emphasis on microplastics and their biological impacts. Her work explores the intersection of environmental toxins, human physiology, and preventative health strategies, with a particular attention to how microplastics and related compounds may influence inflammation, endocrine function, and cellular aging. So thanks so much for coming on, Josephine. We can't quite hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. This is something that's been it's a topic that's been near and dear to my heart that I've been on for the last 12 years of my life. When I discovered how much microplastics and just plastic in general are going in our body through inhalation, absorption, and ingestion. And I know a lot of people have already mentioned, and we are aware, but we have the lowest level of testosterone in history. We have a pandemic in hormone problems, from thyroid to estrogen, you name it. Cancer rates are on the rise. As a mother, I cannot help but be super concerned about this as a scientist, as a researcher, as just a person that lives on planet Earth. Because if people thought that this is not going to affect them or affect somebody that they love, wait until they see how much it's impacting our health. Micro nanoplastics they're crossing the blood-brain barrier, they're crossing the blood follicular barrier, they are crossing the blood testicular barrier, and they are finding them in the brain, some research is saying that there's 0.5% of the brain is plastic, which is leading to all kinds of cognitive decline. When they are found in testicles and in ovaries, they are obviously impacting fertility. And we are seeing that. We are seeing more and more infertile couples who are struggling to have children. And we are seeing them when they are in the brain. There's Alzheimer, there's Parkinson's, there's dementia happening, and we can see that on the rise. I know that there isn't specific studies that are correlating these, but there is enough research and there is enough data that is showing that when somebody has high amounts of microplastics in their brain, they are exhibiting some of these Parkinson's, Alzheimer, and other disease. And microplastics have been found in babies, in the meconium of the firstborn, and they have been found in the uterus. They have been found in the liver, the kidney, and microplastics, nanoplastics have been found in the carotid arteries, and people who had those microplastics in the carotid arteries were more likely to have a cardiac event. The microplastics, nanoplastics have also been linked to the erosion of the gut mucosa and flora. They are known episogens, and there's a lot of research behind that. They cause something called TER, which is toxin-induced insulin resistance. That being said, and I know a lot of people are super scared listening to all this, my research have found that there is a lot of simple things that we can do to massively decrease microplastics exposure and their bioaccumulation in the body. And I've been talking about this topic, as I mentioned, people really love those easy swaps. There are a lot of items that we should be, staying away from, and that really is an easy way to avoid microplastics. Like, for example, tea bags. Tea bags are a top one. There are studies that are showing that every time you steep a tea bag in hot boiling water, it releases up to 11.6 billion microplastics and 3.4 billion nanoplastics, plus bleach and epichlorohydrin. And I invented a solution for that, by the way. It's the all-extra tea strips. Another big one is the black plastic utensils and to-go containers, and those are made from recycled electronics. So those are also leaching lead and other heavy metals. Other ones are bottled water, plastic cutting boards. I have a whole list of these items and easy, more healthful swaps. Happy to share with people. But another one is also canned soup, which is another really surprising one. They found that people who had one canned soup per day over the course of 5 days had an increase of 1,000% of urinary BPA, which is crazy. So I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this initiative. And couldn't be happier that RFK had announced the STOMP, systematic targeting of microplastics, to understand, measure, and remove microplastics from the body. And I know that there is people that, like Dr. Pompa, some people have already developed or will be developing targeted clinically safe strategies to reduce microplastic burden in the body. That is one of the biggest questions that I get asked during my talks is, okay, we understand, thank you for the list to do the healthy swaps, but how do we detoxify from plastics? And I think that's a big concern to a lot of people.
That's great. Thanks so much for coming on. And, we don't endorse many products, but, we do want people to make money by creating things and providing things that help people lead healthier lives. So Elixir teas and tea strips don't have microplastics, so easy for me to endorse them and to recommend that people viewing this spread the word that these are great products, and this is a part of the puzzle of getting microplastics out of our bodies and out of our lives. So thanks for coming on. Next up, we have Congresswoman Julia Letlow, and she represents Louisiana's 5th Congressional District and serves on the House Appropriations Committee and the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. She's a mom of 2. She's a teacher. She's a lifelong resident of the state, and she's been one of the strongest voices in Congress for protecting children, for strengthening families, and for fighting back against the chronic disease crisis, both in her state and in the country generally. So she joins us to talk about why these things matter to her and why she's working so hard and will continue to work so hard to back the things that we as the MAHA movement are focused on. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tony. It is such an honor to be with you and with everyone at MAHA Action today. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for giving me a few minutes to share why this movement matters so much to me. I do want to share with you my why. I'm a mom. My children are Jeremiah and Jacqueline. They are my whole world, and every decision I make in public life comes back to them. I want them to grow up healthy. I want them to grow up strong, and I want them to grow up in a country that actually takes their future seriously. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that's not the country that we've been handing to our kiddos. We're living through a chronic disease crisis in this country, especially among our children. And that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Childhood obesity, diabetes, food allergies, anxiety, and so many other challenges. It's happening all around us. And for far too long, Washington has just accepted it. We built a healthcare system that spends trillions of dollars treating chronic disease and does far too little to prevent it. Like Secretary Kennedy says, that's not a healthcare system, that's a sick care system, and our kids are paying the price. I proudly represent Louisiana, and I can tell you we feel this crisis in our state more than most. We have some of the highest rates of obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease in the country. And in many of our rural communities, families don't even have healthy choices at the grocery store. So when I talk about this epidemic, I'm not talking about a statistic. I'm talking about my neighbors. I'm talking about the families I represent. I'm talking about kids that I know by name. And that's why this movement matters. And that's why I'm grateful for President Trump and for Secretary Kennedy. They're doing something that too many people in public life have been unwilling to do. They're telling the truth about what's happening to our kids. They're asking the hard questions about our food supply, about the incentives in our healthcare system, about the special interests that have profited from this broken system for far too long. That takes real courage, and I stand with them. I believe public dollars and public guidance should support healthy outcomes, not the ultra-processed foods that are helping drive this crisis. And I believe we should stop using taxpayer dollars through SNAP to buy soda and candy. And if we're spending public money on food, it should be going towards real food. And I'm excited to announce that I'm working on legislation to codify President Trump's executive action, resetting our federal nutrition policy. So these reforms aren't just temporary guidance, but lasting law. This shouldn't be controversial. This is about whether we're willing to fight for our kids. It's about whether we're willing to look the next generation in the eye and say, we told you the truth. We asked the hard questions, and we did everything we could to leave them a healthier country than the one that we inherited. I came into public service with a deep sense of calling, and I believe moments like this test us whether we're willing to act with courage and conviction. This is one of those moments. We have a chance to stand up for our children, to stand up for our families, and challenge the broken systems that have failed them for far too long. I'm so proud to be a part of that fight, and I'm grateful for the work MAHA Action is doing. I'm ready to keep working with all of you to make America healthy again. Thank you so much, Tony, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thanks so much, Julia. And thanks for having the courage to fight for our children and for our families and for radical transparency and for gold standard science. We don't know all the answers, but we have to believe in science and believe that we can do better each year, that each generation we can get healthier rather than what we've done, which is to get sicker and sicker and sicker by promoting and by catering towards special interests who, didn't really think about what's best for us or our children. So thanks so much for the work you've done and the work that you continue to do.
It's an honor. Great to be with you today, Tony. Thank you for having me.
You too. So, we're proud to endorse Julia Letlow. She's worked really hard to represent her state in Congress for the past 5 years, and she's now running for Senate to unseat Senator Bill Cassidy, whose stance has not been, on the side of the MAHA movement or Secretary Kennedy. So we're thrilled to endorse Congresswoman Julia Letlow for the Senate. She's proven that she's really open to the issues that matter to the MAHA movement, that she's willing to learn with us, to study with us, to look at real science, to focus on transparency, prevention, and to healthier futures for our children and our families. So we're looking forward to a victory, in the fall. And we think that she's a great candidate, and we're proud to endorse her. Thanks so much. So next up, we have Kyle Diamantis. He is the FDA's, he runs the Human Foods Program for the FDA, and he looks over nutrition and food safety. And he's the FDA's top food executive, sitting on the, setting the strategic direction and operations for food policy. And he's also senior counselor at the FDA. Thanks so much, Kyle, for coming on.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you as always. Appreciate you having me here. This is a great day, a great event last week with microplastics with our colleagues at EPA. And really, HHS and its agencies are laser focused on addressing the growing threat posed by microplastics. It was a really historic commitment last week by ARPA-H, who will be investing significant money in better understanding, measuring, and reducing microplastics, and an equally great commitment by our friends at EPA to designate microplastics as a priority contaminant. And as I think you said earlier, Tony, a really landmark coordinated action between the departments. As some of the previous guests said, microplastics are these really small plastic particles, smaller than 5 millimeters, nanoplastics being smaller than 1 micrometer or micrometer. A human hair is approximately 7 micrometers in diameter. And so, what's important to understand is that there's really a lot of different ways that micro and nanoplastics can enter the food supply. They can enter through the environmental contamination where food is grown or raised, through food contact surfaces, through packaging and processing equipment, and even through biosolids used as fertilizer. And there's probably many more mechanisms, some of which we aren't even aware of yet. And as you heard from Leo and others, there really remains some significant scientific gaps in areas like exposure assessment, toxicology, and standardized detection. And really addressing these issues, and microplastics in general, does take a whole of government approach. And the fact that we're seeing historic collaboration between HHS and EPA is absolutely a demonstration of this administration's commitment to advancing those efforts and addressing microplastics. So what's FDA doing? Well, earlier this year, we put out a list of our 2026 priority deliverables. That document is available online right now. And in that document, we highlight our ongoing work to respond to the increasing scientific data and the public concern about the risks of microplastics in the food supply. And we're highlighting that this year we will be carrying out research to better identify methods that accurately and reproducibly detect, quantify, and characterize microplastics in human food. This really is, Tony, an incredibly important and necessary step because, as the scientist on this call will tell you, it really is that development of multi-laboratory validation of standardized analytical methods that's going to allow us to establish a nationally consistent testing framework to strengthen the scientific foundation for future regulatory decisions when it comes to regulating micro and nanoplastics. We have work ongoing at FDA right now as we sit here today at our National Center for Toxicological Research in Arkansas, where we are working hard to develop those very standardized methods to better detect and characterize microplastics found in food. And we're taking steps to expedite that research given the priority of this issue. Some of that work is really complex and some of that's more simple. Just as an example, you could have nanoplastic contamination from the gloves you're wearing in a lab, from the aprons you're wearing in a lab, even shedding off your skin through contact. And so, things like how do we reduce background levels of plastic contamination in a normal laboratory environment in a non-clean room is something we're really focused on because you need to have that clean environment to be able to better detect and characterize microplastics. And so the work continues at FDA. We're expediting it. We're laser focused on microplastics. We're working with EPA. We're working with our colleagues at ARPA-H. And I just want to note that the major pathways of exposure for microplastics extend beyond our jurisdiction at FDA. For example, EPA has primary jurisdiction over drinking water. And so, studies focusing on food and water obviously benefit from that joint interagency collaboration. And this really is a historic partnership. And it's really one that's set up for success through an interagency collaboration like announced last week. So the work continues. We're excited to tackle it at FDA and really grateful for the time to be on today. Tony, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Kyle. And, thanks for making microplastics a top priority at FDA. Clearly, we, as all the people who have been on today showed, we need to learn more. We need to do more research and then do a better job protecting people. And part of that process is to have gold standard science and then to have radical transparency on what that science is so that people can do a better job protecting themselves. So thanks again for coming on.
Thanks,
Next up, we have Dr. Eric Berg. And Eric is known as the Knowledge Doc, and he's earned that title by being a globally recognized teacher and practical person who lets the public know, with more than 45 million followers all around the world, to really let people know steps that they can take to become healthier. So he's right at the center of making it easier and more affordable to be healthy in this country. He's been doing that for more than 3 decades, teaching people how to comprehend their own bodies so that they can make better practical decisions, have better strategies for better health. So he's just an incredible thinker, writer, researcher, and teacher for all of us. So thanks so much for the work you do, Eric.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate it. I just want to chime in on the plastic discussion because, we are being bathed in a toxic soup of chemicals, and it can be very depressing. So I want to give you some practical things you can do because it's really, plastics affect certain people more than others, and it really has to do with your capacity of dealing or adapting to your environment. Some people get hit harder than others, but the plastics turn into particles that turn into nanoparticles, which are about the size of a virus. They're very tiny. And so you get all the dust that comes in, it's in the oceans. And a lot of the exposure happens with our meat because just like a smaller fish is eaten by a bigger fish, it's eaten by a bigger fish, it just like magnifies the concentration of mercury. Similar things happen with the dairy industry and also the meat industry if you're eating commercial beef. So you're getting a lot of microplastics. So if you took 700 of these nanoplastics, they would fit in the width of a single hair. So they're very, very tiny. And unfortunately, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. They can cross the gut, and they can get into the arteries. And they can create inflammation. Your immune system eats them, and then carries them around. Unfortunately, some of these plastics also come with a package of toxins as well. So it's definitely an issue. So unfortunately, it's impossible to avoid them unless you live in a plastic bubble, but you don't want it to be plastic, right? So good luck on that one. So what are some things that you can do? There's some good news. We do eliminate a lot of the plastics through exercise and sweating. Also, if you're consuming any type of fiber vegetables, especially cruciferous vegetables, the fiber can actually carry out some of the plastics through the gut with the help of bile. And also with the cruciferous vegetables like kale, bok choy, radish, broccoli, it helps you, the phase 1, phase 2 detoxification. So it's going to actually break down and bring some of these toxins out of the body. But I don't recommend just loading up on just regular fiber like Metamucil and things like that. I recommend getting your fiber from actual vegetables because with the fiber comes these polyphenols. It's like the things that like red and purple and different color vegetables, all these phytonutrients that have additional properties that then support the microbiome to help the microbiome detoxify some of these toxicities as well. So I tell you, the microbes are like the human garbage disposal. Eventually, they kind of deal with all the waste in the soils and also your body. But I think the biggest win that you can create is not to use plastic water bottles. Use stainless steel, aluminum. Obviously, don't microwave in plastic containers. Use nonstick pans. So, or stainless steel, something like that. I wouldn't use iron skillets because the iron could be an issue with you. But some of the coating on some of these nonstick pans chips off, and then it gets in your body and creates other issues. As far as clothing goes, it's really hard to find cotton or wool. So you have synthetic fibers, but if you sweat a lot, if you wash your clothes, a lot of those plastics kind of break down, get in the water supply, unfortunately. A good HEPA filter in your house would be beneficial, using wet mop when you actually clean your floors. And then you definitely have to get, as the most important thing, one of the best water filters, because that's where we get a lot of the plastics. But I don't like when people kind of give you doom and gloom without a solution. So I just wanted to give some practical things to do. And over to you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. And, thanks for the practical, common sense strategies that you always have. We all want to lead healthier lives. And it's, your knowledge, your tips, your videos help make it easier to make better decisions. And, you've got 45 million followers. I'm one of them. I take your advice all the time, and I see how it benefits me. So thank you so much for, all the backing of MAHA that you've done, and, all the help that you're doing to the general, population of this country.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for joining us for yet another great MAHA Media Hub, and for tuning in each week. So as I say each week, thanks to all of our speakers for their insights, their dedication, and their contributions to the MAHA movement. We at MAHA have really powerful tools at our fingertips. We have well over 200,000 subscribers to the MAHA report on Substack. Please follow that. They're just great stories. We have the MAHA Institute roundtables that are just getting better and better, stronger and stronger. We've got the MAHA Summit each fall in November. Had something like 1,500 people last year. Please research that, find out about it, and join us for that. We've got the MAHA films, MAHA books, MAHA parties each month. And we've got a mailing list of more than 2 million MAHA warriors, and we're trying to grow that. So any help that any of you can give us on pushing people to join our mailing list is a great help. And then we've got the thousands of influencers who watch this show each week, and they have hundreds of millions of followers. They're an incredibly powerful movement and a voting bloc in this country. And we want to really harness every bit of that power to work with every cabinet member, every branch of government, to support and be a powerful resource to the Trump administration going into the midterms. This country, all the people in this country, we overwhelmingly want the administration to make America healthy. And we want to be partners in that battle. So, following this call, you're going to get an email with recordings of this show and of segments from it and important calls to action. So please share that content, help us grow this powerful movement. And once again, thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 4 p.m.
America's children are sick, and moms have been betrayed. The time for empty promises, long past. Now is a time for action. MAHA is the most powerful force of collective action in generations. The grassroots power of moms and activists has created an army of health warriors with more reach than all mainstream media combined. Together, we can end the chronic disease epidemic. MAHA's influence is reaching millions. It's reaching Congress. And that energy, these chain reactions, are working.
How about Operation Stork Speed?
Dozens of food companies removing toxic ingredients.
I plan to lead by example.
MAHA is now.
We're talking about how to change the culture.
The American people want America healthy again.
There's a renaissance moment in health in America.
for health, freedom, and the truth. Join us at MAHA Action.